Hello and welcome to the Smart RV Podcast,
Episode 9.
episode 9, Joe. I'm John Vanek with Ridgeback RV Services based in Douglas County, Nevada, kind of in the south of Reno, just over the hill from South Lake Tahoe area. And of course, my co-host, Joe Symmes, is from Gulfport, Mississippi. How you doing, Joe?
Yes, sir. Doing great today, John. Yeah, south part of Mississippi Gulf Coast, where we're finally feeling winter. You may not think so, but woke up and it was actually in the 50s. Luckily, we're back up to mid 70s by midday here, but yeah, it's starting to get very cold.
Well, it's cooling down here, and when cool things happen, things happen in the RVs. And if you listen to our last episode, number 8, we talked about some general winterization tricks and tactics and theories and strategies, and we did a pretty deep dive on winterizing. So if you're looking for more information on winterizing, go back to episode 8. But today we're going to be talking about some concerns for people who are living full-time in a really cold environment. And Joe, you have had that personal experience, even though you live in a warm climate now.
Yes, exactly. John, dear listeners, we're going to kind of put the hat on the other shoe on the other feet, hat on the other head, whatever this episode, because I'm going to become the expert on the cold weather living. As our longtime listeners know, retired military and lived all around the country. And for a period of time, for one winter, as a matter of fact, we took the fun step of full timing, and so lived in a Class C through a Maryland winter, which is not necessarily the Arctic tundra, but a lot colder than the Gulf South.
Well, and a lot of the concerns when you're living full time in a cold environment, it's just kind of, you don't have to be at the extreme end for these things to have a lot of importance. In my neck of the woods, it gets cold and obviously, and in the middle of winter, we can have certainly we can get into the 20s, maybe even really cold down into single digits, but that's actually not really the norm for weeks at a time. We do get mild temps during the day, which was probably going to be in the low 40s, maybe high 30s. So we get above freezing. But yet, if you are in a location where you don't have a lot of direct sun, then all of a sudden things change, because now you're in a deeper cold, perhaps on one side of your rig or underneath your rig if it doesn't get sun. So there's all these issues that come in, and so often we come back to one of our favorite phrases, which is know your rig. It's really up
Exactly.
to each individual RV owner to really understand how their rig operates, and in this case, how it operates in the wintertime. So, Joe, I think we're going to take sort of a strategic approach here and start at the bottom of the RV and work our way up and inside, if you will. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I think that's going to lend to the best discussion and help folks follow kind of a roadmap along with us. But before we kind of actually start, just to foot stomp real quick, the point you just made, choosing your location. Maybe that should be the real step one. Can you get a good southern exposure? Can you get out of the shade? Can you get out of the wind?
That's a very good point. And if you are going to somewhere and you're going to be there full time for a long time, that's a great consideration. Thanks for picking that up, because I talked about it, but I didn't recommend it.
So tip number one, park in the right place.
Yeah, to park in the right place. All right. So where are you going to start? I'm going to start with a sip of coffee while you start with your first tip, trick, technique of the day.
Yeah, exactly. So so you're going to stay full time in your RV, and it's going to be some pretty chilly weather for a little longer time. We'll let you individual listeners define that for yourselves, but more than a weekend venture. So you're going to take some more long-term precautions, and you've picked the right spot. Again, with good sunlight and wind blockage, things like that. You don't want to be too low, such that melting snow or heavy rains or whatever, cause you to have a muddy front door kind of thing. The next consideration is going to be water. So you have to have water to your rig. Well, most comfortable, best living is to have water indoor water able to flow. So that means your water hose, your freshwater hose, needs to be well insulated, and ideally product that the RV industry calls heat tape. I believe they use it for houses up north too, but very common in the RV industry. Nice plug-in heated strip that various methods to wind around a hose or put inside insulation inside your freshwater hose to keep your hose from freezing. So one fun fact consideration about that is usually the heat tape has a 120 volt AC plug on one end. You can go ahead and most folks plug that into the pedestal outside. So the good news for you 30 amp owners out there, you're not biting into some of your limited amperage, just keeping this darn heated hose running all the time. You can plug that in independent, and so you're not plugged into your rig is the best course of action on that.
And Joe, I believe you can also just buy a whole new hose with the tape already as
Oh,
part
okay.
of the hose too, correct?
Yes, that's a good consideration. But if you don't have that, yeah, the one I was describing, you can add on to regular garden hose.
Because those hoses with the tape built in, they're great, but they're heavy, bulky, and if you're looking for storage options and things like that too. So you have options in terms of heat tape and keeping your water from freezing in your hose and in your valves as it comes into your rig then.
Yeah, exactly. So the heat tape, and obviously insulate as well as you can. And again, most of the big box home stores will have something for houses to help you out here that you can put some sort of a styrofoam or outdoor weather insulation around your actual freshwater or city water connection if it's exposed on the outside. Um, some higher end rigs have a nice wet bay and maybe a nice Nautilus system, whatnot, that you can be behind a cover, and that's not as big a consideration. But yeah, got to keep that fresh water from freezing.
So we're going to talk about skirting options for your RV in a second here, but I think what you're really talking about is if you need to or can't to is actually putting up skirting around your hose bib
Yeah,
where
yeah.
the water's coming out of the ground, and because your heated hose is only going to help so much in terms of any exposed pipe that you have.
Yeah, excellent point. If the park, sometimes some campgrounds insulate their hose bibs, some don't. You may have to help them out by putting some heat tape around your individual riser. Yeah, kind of feel out that situation and work with your park. But yeah, good point, John. Need to have insulation or heat on the fresh water from one end to the other.
So once we have water coming in and we've got that warm and covered, then literally, perhaps, uh, then is skirting the next element to examine, consider?
Yes, sir. So the thing about skirting that I didn't really realize the importance until a lot of this trial by fire in my situation was you really need to keep the cold winter winds from whipping underneath and kind of taking away whatever heat you build up inside eventually. You'd be amazed at how much of a wind tunnel effect, number one, that RV can be down to the ground there. And number two, how that can really whisk away the heat you build up and eventually start to cause problems in the underbelly. Even if you've got a nice warm cozy living area inside, keep in mind you have some exposed components, some black tanks and water pipes and things underneath that you need to also keep warm. If you don't have a heated underbelly or don't even have a full Coroplast covered underbelly, the skirting really helps. Plus, the warmer your basement, so to speak, the warmer the house. So when it comes to skirting, you've got several options. Um, Depending on how robust or fancy you want to be. um, there's the old school. You can always put hay bales, straw bales down around the outside. Those work well. They may not look very sightly in some instances and could even potentially attract critters and varmints and insects. So not always the best, but usually the cheapest, pretty robust and available in a lot of parts of the country. Another option is to build your own. And I've seen pretty elaborate setups with a little bit of wood for bracing and some sort of closed cell foam that you can get from a big box store. Some 4x8 sheets of styrofoam, as thick as you can get it, 2 or 3 inch, and cut to fit. Brace that around. Again, a little more construction involved, but obviously a lot lighter weight. And then kind of on the upper end of the scale, there's some really nice air options. They're big air inflatable tubes, and those are kind of the best of all worlds. Obviously, the most expensive, but really nice because they can conform to all the unique shapes of the underbelly. You can get them exactly where you want and put them in place pretty easily. And normally they kind of come in kits, modular designs that you buy however many you need to fit your rig.
And I would think too that depending on where you are wintering, if it's on a private land, maybe your family's backyard or something like that, that's one thing. But if you're in an RV park, might be a good idea to check with the RV park management before you select your skirting or insulation options, because they might not necessarily agree with having hay bales, for instance, brought in. Thoughts
Exactly.
on that?
Yes, yes, exactly. Definitely check local park advice, restriction, rules. What are their neighbors doing and having success with? And I can imagine doesn't have much down here, but might be a little cottage industry then of mobile techs coming around and helping to skirt rigs.
That's right. And a point that I just want to make sure we don't forget is that when you're skirting or offering any sort of installation to the underbelly or underneath the rig, as you mentioned, you're the more you have to work to keep that warm, the more fuel the more fuel expense you're going to have over the course of winter also. So when you're looking at skirting options, insulation options, obviously we're going to look at the expense of that, whatever it is, but you also want to factor in the upside, which is you could be saving money on propane and electricity in some issues by keeping the bottom side underneath your rig insulated.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and we'll probably touch on that at the very end. Some considerations for fuel, both propane, electricity, and whatnot. But yeah, we'll do the bottom to top thing, but we'll circle back at the end on that. So once you've got your insulated hose or insulated tape on your hose, fresh water's taken care of, and you got some skirting, it's also a good idea to consider your tanks underneath. Lots of RVs nowadays are coming with tank heaters, and those that don't, there's still sometimes some heated ductwork from the furnace that goes into the underbelly to provide a little bit of heat. Or in my case, it was again kind of a low end Class C that didn't have any of these fancy features. Sometimes just putting a couple lights underneath, incandescent bulbs. Again, being careful of fire hazards and things like that, but could provide some sort of warmth generated underneath and help keep your tanks and pipes from freezing. But again, in Nevada, you've got some more experience with that here recently than I do, John.
Well, I think the main thing, again, coming back, not only knowing your rig, but in the wintertime is understanding what's going on with the weather. We are fortunate enough that for many RV owners, most of the time, again, we might have freezing temperatures, but then during the day it warms up enough that you're in a you're in a t-shirt outside. If there's no wind, and the ambient temperature could be in the 40s, but because of our elevation, things like that, it feels much warmer, and then the rigs warm up. And understanding what we're trying to accomplish here is not necessarily to keep all these to keep these components warm. We are trying to keep them from freezing. You know, uh, 35, 36, 37 degrees is just as good as 45 degrees, because what we're really trying to do is to prevent the damage that can be caused by freezing components, not to mention the inconvenience if your water hose is frozen and you need water in the morning, right? But
Yeah, yeah,
again,
good point.
understanding the interplay of the environment, the sun, the temperatures as they go up and down. We have storms come in, and all these variables come into play. Um, so we've touched on a couple of things. Do you want to talk about, and actually I was going to go back. You and I, we actually diagnosed a couple of failed tank heater pads when you were out here a couple weeks ago. And if you're not familiar with what these heaters are, they're typically maybe like a 12-inch by 18. They come in various sizes, maybe 12 inches by 24 inches. They're just a very thin pad with adhesive that is then stuck onto the bottom of your freshwater tank, your gray tank, your black tank if you have a heater there. And they're 12 volts. They run off the wiring. In this case, we had some water intrusion that Joe and I think caused two of the three tank heaters to short out. We had good 12 volts going to the pads; they just weren't warming up. And these are we're looking at about $80 to $100 to replace two of them. In fact, some models are even sold in sets of two. But the big thing here is that they're underneath or enclosed by the coroplast, and if they fail, it's a lot of work to get that coroplast off so you can service the tank heaters.
Yeah, not that much trouble to replace the heater, but hard to get to, like a lot of things in RV world.
So if we've got our tank heaters going, maybe as you mentioned, you're ducting. In fact, on the same rig, because what happened in this unfortunate story, water leak occurred from the low point drain, but it was all draining into the coroplast, and the owner didn't realize what was happening until the entire coroplast catastrophically fell off the bottom of the frame. And
No.
that's how that was the first call. Hey, I've got some sort of water leak and my bottom is falling out. And I went and repaired that. And then it kind of, we were waiting for the coroplast to come in. And then the next thing the owner says, hey, you know what? I don't think my tank heaters are working properly because I'm getting some blinking lights. Joe happened to be out here that weekend. That's when we diagnosed the heating pad failure. So we waited for that to show up, and then unfortunately, she's having trouble with her furnace. So we're in the middle of fixing her furnace. We're waiting for some solenoids to arrive. Poor thing, before we can get you got to take things in order of priority. So furnace first, tank heater second, coroplast last, and we
Yeah.
don't want to be closing up the coroplast if we have any questions about any sort of potential wiring issues, because we're just creating more work for ourselves down the road. But also in her rig, right, coming off of her furnace, one of the 2-inch ducts coming out is just coming down into the underbelly in that same area around the tanks. So there's a really good example, obvious to see when the coroplast is down, how you have some of the furnace heat going into the underbelly. Again, just trying to keep things up, you know, a good number of degrees above freezing.
Yeah, exactly.
So while we're talking, you want to talk more about tanks, or do you want to head kind of inside the rig now?
Yeah, let's go ahead and head inside, and I will go ahead and rank my next tip as maybe the top. At least the wife and family felt that this was the top thing we did.
Well, that's important.
So all of these are great. All of these are vital. All of these are important. But maybe the most important is, what does the air feel like to you? And what we discovered living kind of in again, Maryland, a coastal area where we had a wet winter, wet cold, is
Yeah.
you can have warm, moist air inside, and you are still dealing with moisture issues then throughout the season of trying to fight against mold and mildew, things like that. But it also just doesn't feel to your skin comfortable. And we learned kind of mid-season about this and the concept. You'll find it a lot more magnified in an RV than your house because of the dramatically smaller square footage. So you're dealing with hundreds of square feet and maybe a couple people cooking, pets, whatnot, all things that are perspiring, respirating, things like that, putting moisture into the air. And a couple hundred square feet makes a much bigger difference than a couple thousand or 10,000 or something. So what we did is run right out and pick up a good dehumidifier. Now, they make small RV ones, they make countertop ones. There's some modern HVAC units with built-in dehumidifying. All those are good. What we did, again, this a few years ago, but just cheap but heavy duty option here is went to local big box store, bought one you'd use for a house, kind of a little R2D2 looking device that sat on the floor. Yes, when you're living in a Class C through a winter, floor space is a premium, but this was worth the 2 foot by 2 foot footprint. Plugged it in, and yes, we were using some of our limited amperage then. However, when that thing kicked off and started making warm, dry air, warm is kind of the byproduct. Main thing it makes is dry air, but within an hour or two, it felt completely different inside. And after running for several days, obviously you need to frequently dump the tank or set up a way that it can drain into a shower or sink or something. It was a dramatic difference. You'd open the door and go inside, and it just felt nice and warm and dry, which is exactly what you wanted coming in on a winter stay.
Well, that's a really good point because I think most of us, when we think about it, dehumidifier in a humid environment, we tend to think more of the summertime. But absolutely, the humidity levels, and that again varies across the country. In your case, much more humidity in winter in Maryland than there is in my neck of the woods. But that can still make a difference. So it's that and I also think that maybe what you wear in wintertime. I mean, even at home during the wintertime, we typically try and keep the house temperature in the 60s, maybe 67, 66. And we just sort of gravitate to wearing sweaters or turtlenecks. And it's not that we're cold, but just a little bit of clothing like that can also make a big difference, which again reflects in the sense that if you lower your energy consumption, you're going to lower your cost during the winter. And here's, as you mentioned, the feel of the air being drier versus humidity is a big piece of that. And I think there's also something about a happy wife leads to a happy life or something like that. So
Yeah,
I think that's
yeah.
what you were referring to during this this experience.
Yeah, the ironic thing, it's kinda something to get your head around, but you don't necessarily wanna be warm, you wanna feel warm, and, humidity makes a huge difference in that, and again, being a guy that had normally lived in the South, I understood it for air conditioning and cool, dry air in the summer, but boy, it made quite a difference when we could dry out the, warm air in the winter.
So Joe, let me ask you this. So if we've got some drier air, we're kind of controlling our indoor environment as best we can. There's also some potential ways to insulate from the inside, insulating windows, your skylight, vent, those things. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the best way to insulate those, and are they all? Is it always best to have that insulation in place?
Yeah, good question, John, because as we were tackling these obstacles one at a time and life was getting better as we figured out solutions for each, we pretty soon turned our attention, and a lot of folks will figure this out real quickly, that RV windows are, again, not necessarily insulated like your home windows are. And you began to see, hey, I'm waking up in the mornings to some moisture, some condensation on the inside of my windows, maybe running down the windows, in the window sills in the mornings, especially. And again, product of relatively moist air in the small space, and then a cooler temperature at night, and not as well insulated glass. Yeah, you have the condensation issue. So we developed a regiment of kind of drying and mopping the windows each morning. Lots of full timers end up doing things like that. You'll understand what we mean. Um, and so folks get the idea that, hey, I'm going to, again, use some foam board insulation or some kind of maybe windshield covers or things like that that we use in our Class C that you might use to keep the sun out, and just going to put those in the windows. Um, you can do that to limited effect, I found, because number one, definitely makes it darker and not,
Ah,
again,
sure.
not doesn't feel as inviting when you hardly ever have any natural light, even in the middle of the day, because you got all the windows covered. And number two, that still was leaving a space between the window and that insulation, so we still have the condensation forming. But now, instead of being able to dry it up relatively easily, say any kind of moisture wicking insulation, now you're going to have problems with that wicking it up real soon. Or if it wasn't, you had to take the insulation down out of the way and then dry and then put it back. If you have particularly leaky windows, maybe I give this a C minus as far as good ideas. It's okay, but I didn't think at the end of the day we're making much headway with that because you can't just set it and forget it. You need to remember you still have condensation. You still need to check behind because you're still going to be fighting against mold in the long term.
Yes, and these are all issues that if you don't recognize what's going on today in terms of condensation and it draining and leading to other mold and other water damage incidents, you're not going to probably realize that for months down the road.
Right.
And then there's going to be a lot of damage.
Yeah.
So a lot of things to consider.
Yeah, so the last thing, though, that I would give this a better grade, the RV industry has lots of these products. They fit in vents, any kind of roof vents, ceiling vents, the good old 14 by 14 standard size openings. They're sometimes reflective on one side and kind of the um, white, woolly, insulated part on the other. You can put those in the attic vents, ceiling vents, and I did find those were pretty effective. Obviously, you lose a lot of heat out of the top. That plastic vent wasn't insulated at all. Of course, we weren't using the fan at all in the winter, and that did seem to work pretty well. Again, you lose some light, but you cover one of the big heat loss areas with those things.
So it's interesting you mentioned vents because I was just thinking that in the summertime, I'm a big believer in airflow, both for just getting fresh air in and in the summertime getting hot air out. So I will typically leave my bathroom vent open with the fan on in the summertime, virtually 24/7, because there's always going to be heat rising. And if I've got my air conditioner on and I'm trying to cool things down, to get rid of the hot air is an important point. But this also has a winter application because, and you mentioned that you didn't use the vent, but that would also help your humidity control potentially, again, depending on your particular environmental factors. But if you have condensation built up from two, three, four people, dogs, and, if you're building up condensation on the inside during the day, and if you're lucky, the weather is, good, meaning that the sun is out, you might consider opening the vent, turning the fan on, and to be drawing out a lot of that humidity during the day while you're at work and school. You can keep your thermostat set, even in the mid 50s, just so, you have some heat and warmth when you come home, and you're pulling out a lot of that moisture, drying things out. And then when you get home, crank up the furnace. And, the downside, or I should say the upside to having maybe a couple 100 feet to heat up is that a lot of furnaces can heat up an RV in just a few minutes. They can crank
Yeah,
out a lot of heat and
exactly.
make a big difference. So, so that's something to consider also, I think. Your thoughts on humidity control, just
Yeah,
naturally using the vent that's there?
yeah, exactly. And I should be clear. I think if I remember right, we might have used in a couple like the living space vent covers. But no, in the bathroom, we kind of developed a protocol that after taking a nice warm shower, obviously you get a lot of
Yeah.
humidity. It's enclosed space in the bathroom anyway. We developed the protocol that after you get out of the shower, relatively short order after that, turn on and open up the vent and let it run for a few minutes because boy, it sure made that little space awfully cold. So you wanted to get out of there and get on your nice warm pajamas, but um, it was, to your point, it's kind of worth the getting the bulk of that moisture out in exchange for cooling the space. Just running a few minutes there, I felt like really made a big difference. And then we'd turn it off, seal it up again, and the heater would recover in short order. But now you weren't fighting moisture all night long, giving the dehumidifier an even bigger workload.
Excellent. Excellent. So A topic that we often cover, because it can be important, is what are your thoughts on, nobody really wants to go out and start draining their tanks, in really cold weather. Should we leave our tank valves open or closed, Joe?
Yes, this is one of those you might have to just put on your snow boots and, tank dumping gloves and trudge through it anyway. Still recommend the good old advice, just like in the summertime, keep that black tank closed. Ideally, you keep the gray tank closed also, in order to be able to have some extra flush water, so to speak, and not develop, issues with a black tank with solids and no liquids in it. No, um, definitely, keep them both closed ideally, and when it comes time to dump the black, which will probably, require you to go outside, unless you have remote valves, open that up, and then dump the gray right behind it to flush each.
And there's a lot of debate, I should say, because people this time of year, if you go on to all the various Facebook groups related to RV usage, and people are asking these questions, and there's a lot of people that will come back and say, "No, I keep my valves open all the time. I've never had an issue." And my response to that is, you might not have had an issue, but you don't know what issue could literally be building up
Oh, no.
until it's kind of a catastrophic situation. I mean, you're not you're not going to run into trouble if you keep your valves closed and dump the tanks just as you described. But if you keep your valves open in cold weather, you're really going to end up with freezing temps having some impact on the liquids and solids that go into your drain hose. That can back up into your tank, and you won't know that that's backing up until it's visible or smellable at the bottom or the top of your toilet black tank. Right? It can literally
Yeah,
back up
exactly.
into the toilet itself, and at that point, that means your black tank is completely full. And in wintertime, it can be completely full of frozen stuff. And you can end up with a catastrophic issue that you might not be able to repair until summer or spring when things thaw out. So an
Yeah,
important consideration to
that's
make.
a case where you take a difficult issue and you make it harder.
Yes, yes, and, I might throw up a photograph, from a client a couple years ago, which was, and unfortunately, he was new to RVing, did not realize that he should keep his valves closed and dump them in the proper manner, and, what happened was, some liquids and solids actually had filled up the black tank and began to leak out where, the down pipe from the toilet meets the black tank, and as it
No.
started coming out, there's a photograph I'll put up here. You can see where uh, stuff is coming out over the tank, and at this
Oh,
point,
no.
his black tank was completely full, and we were in the middle of January, I think, when we discovered this, and it was uh, quite a problem to be dealt with. But
Yeah, I would venture if you think it's difficult to find someone to work, with black tanks and sewage during the summer, ask that same person to do this while their hands are freezing and they have to thaw out your stuff before they can
yes,
even clean out your stuff.
yes, and to use the proper equipment, which essentially consists of a high pressure hose, a jet hose that you feed up into the tank from your valve position. Um, it's one thing to be pushing in high pressure water when everything is not frozen. But when if you're going to be taking water off of the hose bib and you're going to be shooting in 40-degree water probably, uh, and trying to thaw out frozen stuff, it's just not the same. So anyway, I think Joe and I, we're pretty adamant about this. Please, if you are keeping your valves open all the time, please give some serious consideration to closing them and however often is necessary, dump them. Make sure you have plenty of water in your gray tanks to flush out everything behind your black tank. That is just not a problem you want to run into. And for
Yeah.
those of you that have been leaving your valves open and have never had an issue, Joe and I both hope that you never do have an issue.
Yeah. Our thoughts and
Uh,
are with you.
yes, they
So
are.
last topic, John, I think it's important to kind of remember when you're full timing and through the winter is how are you going to maintain energy? So, what I mean by that is BTUs of heat. Y- Lots of RVs are use different kind of propane heating for the furnace, things like that. Fireplace, sometimes have electric fireplaces, things like that. So what I mean is, if you've got removable LP tanks on a towable or something, make sure you've got a plan. Do you have a pickup? Do you have a local refill store? Is there going to be a way to do this? A lot of campgrounds will contract with a bulk refill service, and sometimes the big LP truck will come around in different local municipalities and refill tanks. Some people rent for the winter larger standalone tanks maybe and set beside their rigs and plumb them in. In order to be able to do that, you're going to need a thing called an extend-a-stay, where it basically tees in right after your regulator to your regular LP line, and then allows, especially useful for motorhomes then, because you don't want to, after you've done all this skirting and heat tape and whatnot, you'd hate to crank that motorhome every 2 weeks and drive into town because your tank is permanently mounted to your frame, your ASME tank. So an extended stay is even more valuable in that situation. What do you think, John?
Oh no, very, very good point. And sort of in the same vein, I meant to ask you, um, do we have any concerns with keeping our house batteries warm in wintertime?
Yeah, that's a good point. Batteries prefer to be about the same temperature you do, so uh, you don't necessarily want them to freeze. You don't want to have them in extreme cold either. And if you've got a heated underbelly or a compartment that you, again, could seal off from the outside weather, maybe put in a light or something like that will help them maintain a little bit more warmth. Now, they don't have to be kept at 75 degrees, but any little bit will help.
And battery heater blankets are also an option. Yes. So again, just something else to consider. And I think we'll wrap up this. If you have any questions about anything to do with your RV or winterizing, where do we send our questions, Joe?
You can write to us at contact us. Contact us at smart-rv.com, and we're happy to take user questions there.
Any final thoughts?
Um, Last final thought, a lot of this is good for towables, but if you have, not many towables do, most motorhomes do, if you have your own onboard generator, don't forget to start it occasionally, keep it maintained, run it through the winter, because I was actually in a situation where my RV park lost power, and some of the towable guys were in big trouble. Nice thing about the little Class C was I fired up the generator and was able to keep electrical. Between that and the LP tank, we maintained our heat. But remember, you want to have good and redundant sources of power, especially when you've made your RV kind of immobile for the season.
That's a very good point. And I think most manufacturers' recommendations, generator manufacturers' recommendations, is that once a month, regardless of time of year, once a month you should be turning on the generator and letting it run for about 30 minutes or so. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And this is a great season, great time to do that and to be able to run it under load and everything else. So, sure advantages to having your own redundant power sources, especially at a time of year when it's so critical and can be a life safety item.
There you go. Well, my final thought is always have a nice merino wool or similar toque or beanie to put on, keep your head warm, have a buff around your neck and, maybe, a nice, nice warm sweater, Patagonia vest. That's my favorite. That's what I wear so much during the winter time.
I don't know what any of these
Clothing.
things are.
Yeah, I know. Joe has no clue. But he did, Joe is living proof. we have them right in front of us that you can survive full-time winterizing, winter living in your RV. So again, if you have questions, send them to us, please. Again, contact us at smart-rv.com.
Yeah, that
And with
sounds
that,
good.
Joe, that kind of wraps up our episode for the day. We hope our listeners have learned something and enjoyed being with us. Remember that every Sunday we release another episode. Please like, share, do all those important things. And Joe, next week we'll catch up on some of the jobs we've been working on. I want to talk a little bit about furnaces as it's going into cold weather. Some things that people might find interesting to understand about their furnaces. And until then, if you have any final thoughts, but I just want to say goodbye and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, it is furnace season, and thanks again for everyone listening and viewing, and we'll catch you next week.
Take care.
All right, so long, everyone.